Hello everyone, Tom here, and today I'm going to talk about Rolling Stone magazine's recent 200 Greatest Singers of All Time list. Now this is something I wasn't going to do a video about because enough people have already covered it, but I couldn't stop thinking about it over the last few weeks and I needed to organize my thoughts, so this is how I do it. Now to start with, listen, lists are a crapshoot. I love making lists for myself, of my own tastes, but when a major publication like Rolling Stone comes out with a list like this, they're not going to please anyone, and they're always going to have people like me picking apart their lists. There's no way to win, but I actually do agree with like 80 to 90% of the picks on Rolling Stone's list, so it's not all bad. Now, the nice thing about lists like this is they're usually made by a group of really knowledgeable people instead of just an individual. So those people are going to come together and have different backgrounds and different specialties and expose you to a wide variety of artists. Rolling Stone says in the intro to the list, when Rolling Stone first published its list of the 100 greatest singers in 2008, we used an elaborate voting process that included input from well-known musicians. The results skewed towards classic rock and singers from the 60s and 70s. This new list was compiled by our staff and key contributors, and it encompasses 100 years of pop music as an ongoing global conversation. They then go on to clarify that this list focuses on pop music, as I mentioned, so singers with a pretty large impact and audience, and also that it's great singers, not necessarily great voices, which there is a pretty significant difference. They also say they're weighing this based on originality, influence, depth of catalog, which sometimes I don't think they really follow that criteria, and also depth of legacy. So that's their criteria, and I want to try to approach this academically and follow their same criteria as much as possible. In order to cover this, though, I need to give myself some parameters. It's too easy to take a list like this and just shit all over it, remove artists you don't like or don't know, and replace them with your favorite artists. So I told myself that for any singer I wanted to add to this list, I also had to remove one. And I'm not allowed to remove a singer that I'm not familiar with. Like I said, there's a lot of variety in Rolling Stone's list. So there are 20 singers on this list of 200 that I wasn't familiar with, so I gave them the benefit of my ignorance. And I also got to say good on Rolling Stone for having a pretty diverse list that covers a lot of different genres, parts of the world, eras of music, all that. Same can't be said for their 2008 list, which, as they mentioned, was made using kind of a crowdsourced method, and it was so much worse. I mean, just really an awful list. I've got links to both lists down in the description. So in order to meet that criteria, I had to make some hard decisions, but I'm trying to be objective, and while that's still an opinion, I think of an objective opinion as being different from a subjective opinion. For example, I'm not a big U2 or Prince fan. I'm just not. Never been too into their music. But Bono and Prince both deserve to be on here. I think they are objectively great singers. I'm also prioritizing singers who have had long, consistent careers where they've showed a lot of vocal diversity. Rolling Stone magazine mentioned in their criteria that they think depth of catalog is important, and I agree with that, but I feel like I actually did a little bit better job of following it. They've got a lot of folks on here who maybe only had like one or two albums, although admittedly, I didn't really have the heart to remove Polly Styrene, Lauryn Hill, Jeff Buckley, Robert Johnson, or Amy Winehouse from the list, because even though they don't have a huge body of work, I do think all of those vocalists are great and have a legacy. So if this was a subjective list of my favorite singers, it would have the following people. It would have Nick Drake, Laura Marling, George Clinton, Beck, Elizabeth Fraser from Cocktail Twins, Beth Gibbons from Portishead. It would have Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails, Chino Moreno from Deftones, Bob Mould from Sugar and Husker Du, Joanna Newsom, Matt Berninger from The National, Frank Black from the Pixies, Peter Gabriel, Jeremy Innick from Sunny Day Real Estate, Tunde Adebimpe and Kit Malone from TV on the Radio, Gavin Hayes from Dredge, Guy Garvey from Elbow, and last but not least, Gene Ween, Aaron Freeman from Ween, who I think is one of the most diverse and impressive vocalists of all time. But as much as I love all of those people I just rattled off, I would have a hard time arguing for their inclusion on this list. So all that being said, you're probably going to disagree with my opinions, and that's fine. Tell me why in the comments, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Let's get a conversation going about this and let me know what changes you would have made to this list. All right, for my 14 singers, I would have personally added to Rolling Stone's 200 Greatest Singers of All Time list. These are people who I feel genuinely deserve to be on the list more than the people I removed, which I'll talk about later, based on their vocal ability and the range that they've shown throughout their careers. Of course, as much as I tried to be objective, these are all still singers whose music I like, although I would say not all of them I love, but I'm also still going to be limited to music that I know. It's not perfect, it's still just one guy's list. So in no particular order, first singer I'm going to add is Tom Waits. Tom Waits has had an amazing career spanning the last 50 years, so much diversity in his music. He can do so much with his voice. He was on the 2008 list, and I can't believe that he is not included on this 2023 list. The next singer I'm going to add is Nico Case, both as a solo artist and as a member of the New Pornographers. Nico has such a smooth, powerful voice that she can do a lot with. I saw her live several years ago, and it was one of the best live vocal performances I have ever seen in concert. She's had a career lasting over 25 years with a lot of really superb albums. This next one may be a little bit predictable, but Maynard James Keenan. I mean, the guy has had a career lasting over 30 years at this point, playing with Tool, A Perfect Circle, Pucifer. The guy is one of the best, most influential rock singers of the last 30 years, I would argue, with phenomenal vocal performances. And I do think it's kind of a shame that he's not included here because, well, it does feel like a little bit of a predictable kind of bro pick. It's deserved. The guy is amazing. My next pick is Captain Beefheart, Don Van Vliet. This one I could see being kind of a controversial pick because Captain Beefheart is kind of a you love him or you hate him artist. He's very abrasive. He's not the most accessible, but he takes that Howlin' Wolf blues style singing and really brought it into psychedelic avant-garde blues rock. He has such a wide range. He has so much that he can do with his voice, and while it's not going to be appealing to everyone, they still included artists like Howlin' Wolf and Bob Dylan on this list who have abrasive voices that some people don't like. I think that there is a place for Captain Beefheart on this list just based on his vocal ability and his influence on music. The next singer I'd add is Mike Patton. Truly the man of 1,000 voices, between Faith No More, Mr. Bungle, Fantomas, Tomahawk. I know that there are other bands that he's been in also. The guy's been around since the 80s and is just one of the most diverse and mind-blowing metal vocalists out there, but he can also sing more smoothly. Listen to Faith No More's cover of Easy by Lionel Richie. I mean, the guy can do it all and he's still kicking. Next artist I'm adding to the list is Nick Cave. As a member of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, The Birthday Party, solo artist, the work that he's done recently with Warren Ellis. I mean, his vocals have changed so much over the last 40 or so years. He's covered a lot of ground and has always just been a stellar artist. And he can do so much with his voice. He can do the scary, gravelly stuff. He can do the kind of deep, prophetic stuff. The guy's talents know no bounds, and I was really actually surprised that he wasn't included on here. This next one, as much as I'm not her biggest fan, I do agree that Celine Dion deserves to be on the list. A lot of her fans really threw a fit when she wasn't included, and I did find that kind of weird because she's known as being a consistent powerhouse vocalist. Whether you get into her songs or not, it's what she's known for, and she's very notable for that reason. This one I feel particularly strong about because I'm a huge fan, but Geddy Lee from Rush. I mean, Geddy Lee has one of the most recognizable voices in rock music. Rush had a nearly 50-year career, and I can't believe that while Geddy gets recognized for his bass skills and Neil Peart gets recognized for his drum skills, I feel like Geddy always gets snubbed when it comes to singers lists like this, and Alex Lifeson always gets snubbed when it comes to best guitarist list. Everyone in that band was top-notch at what they did. I think that a lot of rock music and metal music would not be what it is if it wasn't for Geddy Lee and his vocal style. This next one I am not the first person to bring up, and that's Janet Jackson. I am going to jump on the bandwagon here and say I don't understand why she would not be included in a list like this. She is not just Michael Jackson's sister or something. Her run of albums to the late 90s, early 2000s was really terrific, and she showcased a lot of great vocal ability on there, so I don't know why she was left out. Next, going back to the 70s and 80s, another rock powerhouse vocalist, Ann Wilson from Heart. I mean, God, listen to Heart. Ann Wilson, she is an incredible vocalist, and even if you've seen some of the live performances more recently, I know there was the one of, I think it was like the Kennedy Center Honors or something, where she sang Stairway to Heaven and just like blew the whole crowd away. I mean, she's still got it. Next, getting back into metal, along the lines of Geddy Lee, or like Rob Halford and Dio, who were included on the list, Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden has had an amazing run over the last 40 or so years since Bruce Dickinson joined the band. I know he wasn't in there for a while there, but I think he's certainly and arguably the most notable vocalist of Iron Maiden, and they're one of the most important bands in rock history. Next up is Scott Walker, who has such a unique and identifiable voice, singer-songwriter from the 60s, who also had this really bizarre resurgence in the 90s and 2000s. If you haven't heard it, it's all over the place. The guy's voice is, in his later stuff, maybe not exactly what you would call great on a technical basis, but his early stuff was really incredible and included a lot of great vocals. And I think that even his later stuff, where he went a little off the beaten path, still shows a lot of variety and was still inspiring a lot of artists. All right, next artist that I'd add to the list is Cedric Vixler-Zavala from the Mars Volta, At the Drive-In, Anti-Mask. I think he might have some other projects as well. Over the last 25 years or so, I mean, the guy has done the post-hardcore kind of screamy vocals and At the Drive-In, the higher, more shrieky vocals in the Mars Volta. I mean, he can do it all, and he has shown so much depth and diversity in his vocal career, and he's still doing it. Mars Volta just put out an album last year that sounds nothing like any of their other albums, and it's still a great vocal highlight for Cedric. Whether you really liked the album or not, I think his vocals are still top-notch. And last but certainly not least, I think this is the person with the shortest career that I'm including on this list, but I think she's still very deserving. Maybe I just like her a lot, maybe I'm biased, but Janelle Monáe. Janelle Monáe is terrific. She's only got a few albums out, but I would say that over the last 10 to 15 years in the pop R&B world, she has done a lot of really interesting stuff that other singers in the genre just aren't really doing. The concept albums, which allow her to play different characters and play around with her voice, I just find her to be absolutely mesmerizing, and I really love everything that she does. I think based on some of the other picks on this list, folks like Jasmine Sullivan and SZA, I do think that Janelle Monáe deserves a place on this list somewhere. Next, I want to talk through some honorable mentions. These are people who I think are worth being part of the conversation, but I didn't really feel strongly enough about them to include them on my list and remove people from the existing list. So I'm just going to rattle through these real quick and maybe provide a couple little comments. Nico. David Byrne. David Byrne does not have a conventionally good voice, but I've seen him live. He has one of the most just flawlessly executed vocal performances that I've heard, and he is very unique. David Gahan of Depeche Mode. Mama Cass of the Mamas and the Papas. The Bee Gees. David Lee Roth of Van Halen. Yonzi of Sigur Rós. Enya. Grace Slick of Jefferson Airplane. Betty Davis. Madonna. And then lastly, Frank Sinatra is included on the list. He's pretty high up, too. So I was surprised to not see Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Martin, Bing Crosby, or Nat King Cole included either. All right, next I'm going to go through the singers that I am choosing to remove from the list. Now, disclaimer, all the people I'm removing are great singers in their own right. For each of these, though, I ask myself two questions. First, do they deserve to be on the list more than the people I added? And if they weren't on this list, would I be shocked or surprised? If the answer was no to both of those questions, I removed them. So once again, not saying that they're bad singers necessarily, but just saying that I don't think they were the best picks for a top 200 list. Starting from the bottom of the list, number 199, and the first singer that I would remove is Glenn Danzig. Look, I'm all for more hard rock and punk to be represented on this list, but I just don't think Danzig is the best pick. He does have a great voice. I love what he does with it between the Misfits and his solo career, but if he wasn't on here, I wouldn't really be throwing a fit about it. Next singer to remove, and the one that probably pissed me off the most from this entire list, is number 198, Billie Eilish. I like Billie Eilish. She's a good singer. Her voice works very well for her style, but she's only put out like 2 full-length albums, and it doesn't show a ton of diversity. I just don't see how you can justify having her on this list when people like Celine Dion are being left off. I mean, even just a lot of other pop singers from today are showing a lot more of that powerhouse vocal ability than Billie Eilish is. I don't understand what person in their right mind would think that she would deserve to be on here more than so many other vocalists. Next artist to remove, and I don't feel good about this one at all. I really struggled here. Number 188, Fela Kuti. He's got a great voice, but his vocals are so sparse and rarely the focus of his music that I just didn't feel like it made sense to have him be on a vocal-centric list. It's not where my mind goes when I think of Fela Kuti's music. So not to discredit him, but I would rather keep the list focused more toward people who their vocals were a core part of their artistic identity. Next on the chopping block, number 181, Bob Seger. He is very good. I just think there are better rock singer picks from that era. He's got a cool voice, but he just doesn't feel flawless in his performance. I think it's kind of odd to me to have him on a list that doesn't include David Lee Roth or Steven Tyler. Next up, number 175, Lana Del Rey. I really like Lana Del Rey, and she's got a great voice, but I feel very similar to what I said about Billie Eilish. Just not a ton of diversity, not a super lengthy career. I mean, she's been around for like 10 or 15 years by now. I don't know. There's a lot of people that were left out. I don't see how you could argue that she's better than a lot of them. Next up is number 137, El DeBarge. He's a fine singer. I just don't really get a lot of feeling or personality from his voice. To me, it feels very manufactured and not very emotive or authentic. It's fine technically, but I just don't really understand why he's so high on this list. Next singer I'm removing from the list is number 134, Axl Rose. I felt good about him being on here at first. He's a very good vocalist and he's very influential. But Guns N' Roses, I feel like, really fell off after the first couple albums, and he hasn't really done a whole lot since. I don't think that his voice has aged all that well, so it kind of feels like he's on here basically just for, like, Appetite for Destruction and Use Your Illusion, which I don't think is a really fair case to be made. I'd rather see room made for artists who have remained consistent and really put out a lot of work. This next one was a really tough decision. Number 130, Courtney Love. I really like Courtney Love's vocals. I really like Hole as a band. At first, actually, I was really happy to see Courtney Love on the list. I was like, oh, she deserves it. But then I got to thinking about the artists that were left off and the ones that had a larger, maybe not necessarily more impactful, but more impressive career. I'm thinking of people like Kathleen Hanna from Bikini Kill and Le Tigre and the Julie Ruin. I'm thinking of Alanis Morissette. Or even like Shirley Manson, Gwen Stefani, more recently Hayley Williams. These are all really terrific vocalists. I don't really understand why Courtney Love is above them when really Hole had a pretty short run, like maybe around 10 years or so, and Courtney Love hasn't really done much since then. Next up, number 125, Joe Strummer. It kind of breaks my heart to remove Joe Strummer from this list because I love The Clash's music. But they're one of many artists on here, some more of which I'll get to, who I feel like they're on here because they had the best songs. They're great songwriters. But that doesn't make their voice better than any other singers. I actually think that to call Joe Strummer one of the greatest singers is kind of missing the point, because part of the charm of the band and part of the point of punk music is to not have a technically great voice. And Joe does not have a technically great voice. And to come back to Rolling Stone's distinction that this is greatest singers list, not greatest voices list, I do think that Joe Strummer has the ability to be emotive and to put a lot of personality into his voice, but for me it's just not diverse enough or technically impressive enough to really warrant being on here. Next singer I'm cutting from the list, number 118, John Fogerty. I really like John Fogerty. I'm a big CCR fan, but throughout their short-lived career and even John Fogerty's solo career, I mean, he's kind of a one-trick pony. He's great at the one thing that he does, but I don't feel like it's enough to really get him on this list. If he wasn't on here, I wouldn't be sitting here going, "Where's John Fogerty?" So I think we can remove him. Number 116 is my next removal, and that is Chet Baker. I think there's a lot of charm in his voice, and I love that what he did for jazz vocals at the time. I actually kind of like that he didn't have the best technical ability, compared to some of the other jazz vocalists who were just killing it. But that's exactly why I don't think he deserves to be on this list. I just don't think he's particularly impressive technically. All right, I got to be careful with this one because I don't want to piss off the Swifties. I don't want them to come burn my house down. But I am removing number 102, Taylor Swift, from the list. I really like Taylor Swift. Don't think that this is just like some older dude just trashing on the young pop artist. I think that Taylor Swift is a great artist, but she's a songwriter. She's known for her songwriting, and that's what's impressive to me about her. And I do feel like that's kind of the only reason why she's on this list is because she's like the biggest pop star in the world right now. But having the best songs doesn't mean you're the best singer. When I listen to Taylor Swift, I am never particularly blown away by her vocal ability. I'm blown away by her songwriting ability and by the fact that she has been able to evolve her career over the last 15 to 20 years in a way that always feels fresh and pushing her sound and production styles forward. But I don't think there's any point in any album or song where I'm just like, holy crap, she is a phenomenal singer. The last two singers I'm going to remove from the list fall into the same kind of category as Taylor Swift, where I feel like they're on here for their songs and just the breadth of their career and legacy rather than their actual singing ability. And next, that is number 77, Bruce Springsteen. I'm going to be honest and put my bias out there. I am not a big Bruce fan. I don't really get into his music, and his voice is a big reason why. It's kind of grating to me. But even trying to look past that, like I said, I left some singers in here whose music I don't like all that much. But to me, Bruce Springsteen is just, I don't get it. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. I don't think he's that impressive of a singer. He's always off pitch to me. He does the kind of gruff rock thing and he's very emotive. I appreciate that, but I think there are people who do it better. And while I'm fine with him going down as one of the greatest songwriters of all time, I just don't think his voice is on the same level. I don't think his singing abilities are on the same level. Last singer that I'm removing from this list in a decision that I'm sure will confound and piss off a lot of people, number 36, Kurt Cobain. I love Kurt Cobain. I love Nirvana. But based on some of the other criteria and other people I've removed from the list, I just don't see how I could keep him on here. It's the same thing that I said about Bruce Springsteen and Taylor Swift. He's on here because he had the best songs. He had songs that people will be listening to for decades to come, and I respect that. Nirvana is actually one of my favorite bands. But when I really look at Kurt's vocal ability, I mean, they only put out 3 albums, well, and then the live album, the MTV Unplugged, is a pretty phenomenal vocal performance. But Bleach, the vocals were so-so. The vocals on Nevermind and In Utero were great, but here's my point. Thinking about this objectively, if you didn't know Nirvana's songs, and let's say you put Kurt Cobain up against Mark Lanegan from the Screaming Trees and Ed Kowalczyk from Live, and let's pretend that you had never heard a Nirvana song, a Live song, or a Screaming Trees song, and you heard each one of those singers sing a song. Would you pick Kurt Cobain above Mark Lanegan or Ed Kowalczyk? Kurt has had the bigger impact, arguably, but that's because of his songs, not because of his singing abilities, even though he is a fantastic vocalist. I mean, I'd pick Nirvana over Foo Fighters as a band any day, but even Dave Grohl has been able to show more range and ability in his career than Kurt had the chance to do. He's on here for his songs, not for his singing. I think it's just way off the mark to say that only 35 people in the history of the world are better singers than Kurt Cobain. All right, this next list, this next section, I'm calling Egregious Misrankings. These are people who I feel deserve to be on the list, but their placement in the list feels way off to me. Now, I'm not going to argue like, oh, this person that's number 46 really should be number 43. Like, that's not that much. But anyone that I saw that I was like, this feels like they are off by like 50 or more rankings, that's what I wanted to talk about. So first, number 112, Ozzy Osbourne. I think he should be way higher than that. He's a phenomenal vocalist, hugely influential. Right after him, number 111, Fiona Apple. Fiona Apple's great, but like, put her much lower on the list, I'd say. Like, her vocals are great, but once again, I think of her as more of a songwriter. To say that she's better than Ozzy Osbourne, I don't know about that. Number 109, Roger Daltrey from The Who. Roger Daltrey should be way higher than that. The guy's incredible. I put him up there with Robert Plant and Freddie Mercury, honestly. I don't know why he's in the bottom half of this list. Number 105, Eddie Vedder. He was actually originally on my chopping block. I was going to remove him, but after a second thought, I thought, he's had a really long career. He's always shown a lot of control over his voice, a lot of range, a lot of diversity, even if it is fun to make fun of his garbled enunciation. The guy is a really good vocalist, but I don't think he deserves to be as high as 105. To say that Eddie Vedder is better than Roger Daltrey makes no sense to me. Number 86, Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson at 86? Are you kidding me? I thought he for sure had to be in the top like 20 or 30. Maybe today people just think that Michael Jackson has been overhyped. And you can think that as much as you want about his songs or his albums, but I think that his vocals, his performance ability from the Jackson 5 through his solo career was just solid. I think he deserves to be way higher than 86. Number 83, Amy Winehouse. This feels a little high to me. I'm okay with her being on here, but like, Amy Winehouse better than Michael Jackson? Number 82, Steve Perry. Maybe it's just because I don't like Journey all that much, but he's a good vocalist. I didn't have the heart to remove him, but I don't think he deserves to be in the top half, especially when people like Roger Daltrey are in the bottom half. Number 68, Rihanna. This felt kind of high to me. Rihanna's very good and she's had a really impressive career, but I think when it comes to pop singers these days, she's not really one of the more powerhouse vocalists out there. I would probably put her in the bottom half of this list, maybe somewhere around 150, give or take, but 68 feels high. Number 63, Robert Plant. I really thought he would be a little higher than this, but, it's not too far off, probably. Number 44, James Brown. I really assumed that James Brown would be a top 10 or top 20 pick on this list. Number 43, Ariana Grande. This one's interesting because of the current big pop vocalists. I definitely think she is one with an amazing voice, better than most, maybe better than all of her contemporaries, but 43 still feels very high to me. She's very technically impressive, but I don't think she's quite emotive enough to really warrant a spot this high up. Lady Gaga's not too far off from her, and I think Lady Gaga is significantly better than Ariana Grande in terms of really capturing emotion, expressing a lot of feeling, while still maintaining that technical ability. So I'm just not sure I agree with her being that high. Number 39, Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong is a very unique vocalist, and upon listening back to some of his stuff, because I almost thought about removing him, I realized, he actually is a very good, capable, technical singer, but I don't know that he deserves to be in the top 40 here at number 39. I think there are a lot of vocalists who just are able to do more than him. All right, these next couple really perplex me. Number 15, Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan is a controversial singer. A lot of people love him, a lot of people hate him. Once again, I think he's on here more for his songs than anything. But I actually have been someone over recent years who has really defended Bob Dylan's voice against a lot of people who hate his music just because they hate his voice. He does have a strange voice, but he actually is a very good singer. If you listen to his stuff from the 60s really closely, listen to Blonde on Blonde, listen to the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan, his voice changed and evolved so quickly over the course of like 4 or 5 years, but he always had control over it. He's on pitch, he's doing a lot of little nuances and little runs with his vocals that I think because of his songwriting style, they're easy to miss, but he's actually very good. Now, that being said, while I will defend him from the haters till the day I die, To say that there's only 14 singers in the history of the world who are better than Bob Dylan is completely insane to me. No, like, he deserves to be on the list, but I don't even know if he deserves to be in the top half of the list. I feel similarly about number 12, John Lennon. I love John Lennon. I love the Beatles. You all probably know that already. But John Lennon is the 12th best singer of all time. I mean, I just don't get that from him. Once again, he's a tremendous songwriter, and that's what he's known for. And his vocals are very good. But to say that there are only 11 people better than him is off the mark. And lastly, number 5, Mariah Carey. I actually really agree with a lot of the rest of the top 10. Stevie Wonder, Sam Cooke, Whitney Houston, Billie Holiday, Aretha Franklin, like, yes. All of them deserve to be there. Mariah Carey, she deserves to be on the list, but I would have put her lower than this. To put her at number 5 feels a little high. Maybe top 30, top 40. I just don't think Mariah Carey quite has the diversity to be at number 5. So, what do you think? Did you take a look at the list? Do you agree with my picks? Do you disagree? Where do you think I missed the mark? Where do you think Rolling Stone missed the mark? Let me know in the comments, and let's get a conversation going. Thanks for watching.